The diary of Tamara Samsonova was discovered by investigators who were searching her apartment after her arrest for the murders of several people in St. Petersburg, Russia. As they pored over the pages of the diary, they were horrified to discover the true extent of Tamara's depravity and the grisly details of her crimes. Tamara's diary was written in a neat cursive script that belied the horrors contained within its pages. Tamara had meticulously recorded each murder, including the victim's name, age, and occupation, as well as the date and time of their death. The first entry detailed the murder of her friend Valentina, whom she had lured to her apartment under the pretense of helping her with her laundry. Tamara wrote with an unsettling sense of detachment as she described how she had drugged Valentina's tea and then strangled her with a scarf before dismembering her body and disposing of the remains in a communal courtyard in various parts of the city. As the investigators read further into the diary, the scope of Tamara's crimes began to unfold. The diaries were filled with disturbing and graphic details of Tamara's crimes, as well as her thoughts, fantasies, and obsessions. They also revealed a dark and twisted side to Tamara's personality that had been hidden from the world. She had killed and dismembered at least 10 people over the course of several years, targeting victims of all ages and genders. In each case, Tamara had used her perceived status as a helpful neighbor or grandmotherly figure to gain their trust before carrying out her gruesome acts. She had also included graphic descriptions of how she had killed and eaten each person, often describing in vivid detail how their flesh tasted and how it made her feel. Tamara's diary was filled with details of the horrific crimes she'd committed. She wrote about how she had murdered a young couple who had come to her for help after their car had broken down on the side of the road. Tamara had invited them into her apartment and then drugged them with a combination of sleeping pills and poison before proceeding to dismember their bodies and dispose of the remains in various locations around the city. Tamara described how she had carefully removed the flesh from their bones and roasted it in her oven, savoring the taste of their meat as if it were a gourmet meal. She wrote about how she had experimented with different cooking methods. Another entry detailed the murder of a young girl who had come to Tamara's apartment to ask for directions. Tamara had offered the girl a drink and then laced it with poison, watching with cold detachment as the girl convulsed and died on her living room floor. Tamara then proceeded to dismember the girl's body and scatter the remains throughout the city, like breadcrumbs left for some dark and twisted fairy tale. As the investigators read on, they became increasingly disturbed by the sheer depravity of Tamara's crimes. Her diary was filled with descriptions of dismemberment, cannibalism, and necrophilia, each entry more chilling than the last. Tamara reveled in the attention that her crimes had brought her, imagining herself as a kind of supernatural being, endowed with special powers that allowed her to move through the world undetected and to prey upon her victims without fear of retribution. Despite the horrors detailed in her diary, Tamara seemed to see herself as a kind of hero, a Baba Yaga who was doing the world a favor by ridding it of people whom she deemed unworthy or undesirable. She wrote about how she had targeted sinners and deviants, as if her crimes were some kind of twisted form of vigilante justice. In one entry, she described how she had killed an elderly man who had been accused of sexually assaulting a child, writing with a sickening sense of satisfaction. As she detailed the man's brutal murder, and dismemberment. As the investigators read through the diary, they were struck by the sheer banality of Tamara's existence. She seemed like any other elderly woman, going about her daily routine and interacting with her neighbors in a seemingly harmless way. But beneath the surface lurked a dark and twisted soul. A Baba Yaga Granny Ripper who had killed and consumed the flesh of her victims with a twisted glee. The diary also revealed Tamara's peculiar fascination with the Baba Yaga, the infamous witch from Russian folklore. She seemed to identify with the Baba Yaga, seeing herself as a kind of modern-day incarnation of the witch, complete with her own hut on chicken legs and magical powers. She had also been leaving offerings of food and other items for the Baba Yaga, hoping to win her favor. She had begun to believe that the witch required human sacrifice in order to be appeased, and she had started to offer up her neighbors as sacrifices to the witch. Tamara wrote about how the Baba Yaga had visited her in her dreams, whispering secrets and incantations that she used to enhance her powers of seduction and manipulation. She believed that her crimes were a way of enacting the witch's ancient rituals. As the investigators delved deeper into Tamara's diary, they began to notice a pattern in her killings. Many of her victims were young, attractive women whom Tamara seemed to envy and despise in equal measure. She wrote about how she had always been jealous of their beauty and youth, and how her crimes allowed her to exert control over them and to consume their flesh as a way of reclaiming their vitality for herself. The diary also revealed Tamara's deep-seated sense of loneliness and isolation. Despite her outwardly friendly demeanor, Tamara seemed to have few real connections with others. She wrote about how she had never been married or had children, and how her only real companionship came from the voices in her head and the Baba Yaga who visited her in her dreams. It was as if her killings were a way of forging a connection with the world, a way of asserting her power and control over those who had rejected or ignored her. As the investigators read through the final pages of Tamara's diary, they were struck by the sudden change in tone. Tamara seemed to have become increasingly paranoid and delusional, writing about how the police were closing in on her and how she could hear the voices of her victims calling out to her from beyond the grave. She described how the Baba Yaga had abandoned her, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. The investigators found a collection of knives, saws, and other tools that she had used to dismember her victims, as well as a cache of bones and other remains hidden in her apartment. They also discovered that Tamara had been using her apartment as a makeshift laboratory, where she conducted bizarre experiments on animals and humans in an effort to unlock the secrets of the Baba Yaga's power. The final entry in the diary was dated just a few days before Tamara's arrest. In it, she wrote about how she had killed a young man whom she had met in a park, and how she had consumed his flesh in a cannibalistic ritual. She wrote about how the act of killing had become a kind of addiction for her, a way of satisfying her insatiable hunger and her deep-seated need for power and control. As the investigators closed the diary and set it aside, they were left with a sense of profound unease. They were horrified by the extent of Tamara's crimes, but they were also baffled by her outwardly friendly and helpful demeanor. Tamara was known around the apartment building as a kind and gentle woman who was always willing to lend a hand to her neighbors. She was often seen walking her dog or tending to her garden, and she was known for her delicious homemade pies and cakes. But even as she was led away in handcuffs, Tamara remained unrepentant and defiant. She continued to insist that she was a modern-day Baba Yaga, and that her crimes were part of a larger plan to bring about the witch's resurrection. Tamara Samsonova was a woman who had lived among them, a seemingly harmless grandmother who had been capable of unspeakable atrocities. Her diary was a testament to the darkness that lurks within the human soul, a reminder that evil can come in many forms, and that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who walk among us, disguised as everyday people, even within the heart of a seemingly kind and harmless old woman. And it was a warning to all those who would dare to delve too deeply into the secrets of the Baba Yaga, lest they too become ensnared in her web of darkness and despair.